So we have that.
Courtney Elliott.
You are up.
Ladies and gentlemen, I may not be the first person to say this, but on behalf of myself, my co-counsel, and everyone here today, thank you for giving us your time and attention. You've heard us speak, and you've listened. Our job's almost done, but yours is just about to begin. It's easy to run a business when financial profits are up. It's easy to renegotiate a loan when the market's stable. In fact, it's even easy to redesign and completely change your entire business when it's good times. But that's not what running a business is always about. It's about getting through the rough times. And that's what this case is about today. A desperate man crumbling under the pressures of an unstable market, a business suffering $1 million in losses, and facing another $400,000 in an upcoming bank loan. This is a case, ladies and gentlemen, about weighing accident versus arson. Let's take a look back at the evidence you've heard today. I'm going to talk about what happened and why. It's undisputed that there's an insurance policy here, but it's also undisputed that there's an arson clause. And that clause states that Mismo Fire shall not be liable for losses suffered due to deliberate acts of an arson. That's what happened at Flinders, a deliberate act of arson. And it all started with the hiring of George Avery. Mr. Jackson hired George Avery in a last-ditch effort to bring his business around, to make some changes. And changes he did. He burned the building to the ground. Accident or arson? Mr. Jackson hired George Avery without checking one credential. Not his education, not his work references, nothing. Because he didn't care. He hired him to set a fire. If he hired him to make new designs, how come the bank, in the month and a half of negotiations, never saw one piece of information? The only information they received is George Avery's false resume. Accident or arson? Now, Mr. Avery was brought on by Sonia Peterson. And as you heard, Miss Peterson knew Mr. Avery, not only at work, but socially. Mr. Korn said they even came to a barbecue together. And Miss Peterson knew that Mr. Avery was connected to not one, but two other fires. What we have here is a pattern. Mr. Avery is hired at Yap Bank. 6 weeks later, building burns down. Investigative theory, arson. Mr. Avery moves to FAS, hired. 2 weeks later, building burns down. Investigative theory, arson. Mr. Avery gets brought on to Flinders. 6 weeks later, building burns down. And in this case, it is arson. Now, you heard Chief Olson talk about the conditions that needed to be set for this fire. Those conditions need to be just right. Good ventilation, the presence of hydrochloric acid, the presence of an accelerant, and Mr. George Avery. And on a cold November night, Flinders Aluminum Factory had all of these factors and burned to the ground. Now, when hot metal comes in contact with shampoo and hydrochloric acid, it ignites and starts a fire. Flinders was supposed to have only 50 gallons of hydrochloric acid, but instead, there was evidence of hundreds of gallons of HCl. Accident or arson? There is presence of shampoo. Mr. Avery didn't have shampoo on him from the morning before. He had shampoo because he used it to start the fire. The machines were warm. Miss Williams even testified that the machines were running after the employees left. Mr. Jackson had gone home, and he was there by 7:30. There was only one man there to start those machines, and that man was George Avery. He went down to the machine shop, started the machines, and started a fire. He wasn't in his office working on designs. He wasn't in his office across the entire building 2 stories up. His body was found in the rubble by the machines. He didn't escape from the fire, or he would have used the stairs next to his office, again, on the other side of the building. What he did was start the fire, and the autopsy reports show that he died from an explosion, and all of his injuries, and the majority of them, were sustained on the front of his body. Injuries that could only have occurred by someone who started the fire.
All right, move to the, like, your closing point.
Okay.
Very good one.
Okay. What you must do today is weigh Mr. Pincus's analysis and Chief Fire Marshal Olson's report. Pincus didn't investigate the building. He didn't talk to witnesses. He's here because he got paid to be. Now, Mr. Olson is here out of his duty to this city as the Chief Fire Marshal. He investigated the fire. He spoke to witnesses. He looked at the autopsy report. The only thing Pincus did was review Chief Fire Marshal's report. But even Pincus decided that Avery, and his behavior was disquieting. And it was disquieting because he started the fire. And they started the fire because in 12 days, a $400,000 bank loan was due. And Mr. Jackson saw no way else to get the money. An insurance policy that he increased the day George Avery started work. Now, if you believe that it's more probable than not, and more likely than not, that this was a case of arson and not accident, then you must find in favor of the defendant. Throughout this case, we've asked you to weigh accident versus arson. But ladies and gentlemen, it's time for you to give your answer, and that answer should be arson. Thank you very much.
Very good.